Here. Oh, how's the audio now? There we go. So check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2.
Check
1 2. Check 1 2. There it is. There it is. So a couple quick announcements. Again, today on Thursday, 7 o'clock, we'll be having our prayer meeting, most important prayer meeting, a week of the meeting, just because, thank you, Joel, for letting us know. It's our most important meeting of the week as we call upon heaven to pray. And then I'll be on next Thursday. Last week we had our VBS, which was our annual outreach, and we had about over 80 some kids here throughout the week, and it was awesome to see our church family and community rally, be able to share with them the love of Jesus, the seed of the gospel. And then we went on Friday night up to Trenton to see Kingdom Capital with Sean Foy and Let Us Worship. Powerful time on the Capitol. We weren't allowed to be on the field because of permit reasons, but we all met in the rotunda of the Capitol building there, and we worshiped and we prayed and we saw God really move in power. They're connected with Turning Point USA, and so it was a powerful time to pray for the state of New Jersey, pray for the Capitol, pray for the legislature and the affairs that are happening. And so it was a great opportunity to unite the body of Christ all across New Jersey. It's probably about 300 people that were there. And so with that said, we're going to turn it over. Pastor Anna's going to come and share a couple minutes on some of the things that are happening in our culture, some very informative things. I encourage you to share the broadcast where you may be, especially if you live in the state of New Jersey or you're concerned about our nation. A lot of things happening that I think as Christians we need to be informed of.
Mm-hmm. So this will be heavy on the court system. I'll say there's one negative and two positive that we're going to go over. So that's better than the typical things we cover, because there will be two positives. So the first one that I want to spend time on is really important because it's happening right here in New Jersey. So basically, Governor Murphy is suing 3 school boards. Okay.
So his administration, when you say Governor Murphy, it's the state of New Jersey.
The state, and Governor Murphy.
Governor Murphy represents the state of New Jersey.
I mean, that's who it is. So he basically, 3 New Jersey districts, Middletown, Marlborough, and Manalapan / Englishtown Regional, they're all being sued by the state for adopting similar policies. Now, hear this. These are the reasons why they are being sued, because now the school board requires teachers and administrators to alert parents if their child begins using a different name. So that's one thing. Pronouns, or a bathroom that contradicts their sex. That is why they are being sued. They are not being sued because they did something heretical or something that's detrimental to anybody. Basically, they're not even saying that the school has to alert every parent if a child is doing this. They're basically saying that if a child is using a different name, pronoun, or a different bathroom that contradicts their sex, their own parent needs to be notified. Because of that, New Jersey, the state, is now suing those 3 different districts. So before we even go on to that, what are they saying? They are saying that, one, they know better. Let me just tell you what this is. They're saying the policies were approved by each district's Board of Education. I'm just setting it up for you so that you know. This article is written June 29th, so just a week ago on a Thursday. And probably 2 days prior on that Tuesday, the Board of Education in all 3 different school districts approved these policies, and just 24 hours later, which will be probably that Wednesday, the 28th, New Jersey Attorney General Matt Platkin filed 3 emergency lawsuits, because this is, my goodness, we could harm children this way, claiming the districts were endangering the safety of transgender students by enacting the policies. In the lawsuit, Platkin stated that outing transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary students poses serious mental health risks and shirks the district's duty to create a safe and supportive learning environment for all. In New Jersey, this guy is saying, we will not tolerate any action by schools that threatens the health and safety of our young people. Without question, the discriminatory policies passed by these Board of Education, if allowed to go into effect, will harm our kids and pose severe risk to their safety. So this is what they're saying. They are saying that, one, the government knows better and cares more about these kids than their own parents. That, let me tell you, that is communism at its highest form.
It's a classic case of a strategy of communistic totalitarian rule where you're diminishing the nuclear family, right? And that's clearly anti-Bible. The Bible gives the nuclear family responsibility to raise a child.
And every time communism comes into power, they will increase government. They will say government is most important, and they want the bond of a child with the government rather than with their parents. It's a classic case. And so basically what our state is saying is that if a parent knows that the child is doing this, the parent, instead of loving the child and directing the child to get the help that they need, is going to harm the child. But the school system, the government, has to protect the child from their parent.
Right. And that's the point of statism in its purest form, is where the state becomes the ultimate rule and even how to rule kids. And then it's a classic case of, listen, the devil doesn't create anything new. He takes the authentic way of how things should be according to the Bible, and he perverts it. So God establishes the union of the family. God knows that the young generation is the most important to encourage and to nourish, because they become the future generations and the future nations and societies. So if you can get them early, right? And so there's this war going on right now for the children.
And look how evil, like our state, New Jersey and Murphy, look at the evil way that they are being used to prevent parents from even finding out so that they can lovingly help the child. Not only that, look on the flip side. Now, without any barriers or even the parents knowing, there are other, let's say, biological males in the girls' bathrooms. What about those girls? In just one of these, I forget, but which state specifically, but a Midwest state, a girl was battered, like beat up tremendously by a trans boy that was in the girls' bathroom, not to mention how many other cases there already were that girls got raped in the bathroom just going to use the restroom, not to mention all the other situations.
So, I mean, like, hats off to these three municipalities who are coming together. And again, this is not just about being Christian. This is about really being morally upright, right? And I think the point is, all of us were created in the image of God, whether you know Jesus or not. And there's a moral conscience, a moral construct that if you don't violate, you recognize that this is evil, this is wrong. So.
So basically, there's a lot of people come. I mean, I am so encouraged by these three towns. All of us really need to take note and say, okay, this is possible. You're going to be placed in the fire, but this is really possible. But basically, this Middletown resident, Mason, he's basically saying they're suing the parents, they're suing the taxpayers who support the Board of Ed, with wanting just to know what's happening with their own kids in the school system, right? So, I
mean, it's crazy, right, to think about this as a reverse of what our government was intended to be, right? Isn't the government supposed to be for the people, by the people? Isn't the government supposed to uphold what the people's desires are?
Well, these school systems, I mean, these towns did exactly what they were supposed to do. They voted and they put people in that they wanted to go on the school board. Right. And now they enacted decisions based on what the people want. And now the big brother, the bigger government, is coming to say, nope, I don't like it. So we're going to sue you. We're going to push so that, this doesn't happen. Now, he's also saying that when they actually had their board meeting, 80 to 90% of the people in the school board meeting actually wasn't even from Middletown. It was like people that were mocking and screaming at them and just carrying on. And it was, very traumatic. Another parent is saying, and you guys all know this, if you were a parent, you went through all of this. Within the school system, you get a phone call if your child is absent. You have to sign permission slips for everything. You have to give permission if they're going to give a Tylenol or any other type of, medicine to them. But in terms of this, it's all hands off and you can't even know about it. How is this even right? And the fact that, they're making it an anti-trans thing, isn't it interesting the language that is being used? Basically, Murphy and the state is accusing these people because they just want to know what their child is doing. They're accusing them of being anti-trans, of not caring about and wanting to put trans kids at risk. It's their own kids that they just want to know what is happening with their own kids. Of course they love them. Of course they want the best for them.
It's a political maneuver. I mean, ultimately, everything gets twisted into politicizing agendas. And ultimately, that's the hot topic right now. It's all about, LGBT and the trans and all that.
And this is really interesting because they phrased it in a little bit of a different way. So if you guys know Murphy, he actually lives in Middletown. That's the town we're talking about. And he lives there. So he must be very angry because he knows they're not the ones that put him into office, right? They said his kids didn't go to the Middletown schools. They're accusing him of not being in touch with the actual residents and what the residents want. He probably is about 1.5 miles from where I'm sitting right now. He is surrounded by state troopers, bodyguards, and yet his neighbors are having cars stolen from their houses on the regular. And he's saying, if you have a firearm in your house, you're ridiculous. See how he's not consistent with the way he lives and the way he governs, right? He's surrounded by guns. He's surrounded by people that will protect him at all cost. And yet if a regular Joe Schmo, a regular resident has a firearm, he is saying that, why are they doing that? I mean, that just shouldn't even be happening, right? It's basically, but that's the same thing. It's like, do as I say, not as I do. I'm sure he had his kids in some pristine type of, private school, but for everybody else, he wants a certain type of rules. And so these people are saying, you know what, Middletown and the surrounding town, they are ready for a fight and they will fight. And I don't know about you, but I'm going to be praying for them that they that God encourages them and strengthens them, and that because this really is a David versus a Goliath type of situation, and yet we know that David can definitely win. But this leads me to our town, and this leads me to Upper and also to Ocean City. I think Ocean City did a great job in electing 3 of really good Board of Education members. But now it's almost like, okay, they've been forgotten and they are really getting pummeled. And, things are getting really nasty at the Board of Ed level. I would encourage, if you're not doing something on a Thursday here or there, see what the schedule is for Ocean City and consider being a part of those meetings. First time, maybe just observe. But I bet you God is going to give you things to say when you kind of get settled down and see what's happening. But it really is about the participation of the residents, participation of those that care about these issues, because it's not enough just to get the people elected. First of all, they are still in the minority. They're not in the majority, but they really need the encouragement of the people, that it's not just those that are anti everything that we believe in that are showing up, but it's also us who believe that children need to be protected, that need to show up at these board meetings. Also Upper, where obviously Impact Church is. The meetings are on Mondays, and we really need to make a show because Upper is actually a stronger anti all of God, principles than Ocean City, if you can believe that. That's really sad to say. And yet, I think we can look at these three towns and see that it really is about putting the right people on the school board but also being present and being showing support and no matter what, protecting the child, whether you have your children in there or not. The children of our communities need protection, and we know that evil is coming against them, and we need to stand up and say our piece.
Awesome.
All
Kudos.
right.
Awesome, yeah.
All right. So now we have two positive stories for the day. The Supreme Court has been really working overtime, and I'm happy to say that just again, within the last couple of weeks, the Supreme Court handed a religious freedom win to a postal worker who refused to work on a Sunday. I think that is so encouraging. So this man, so the Supreme Court ruled unanimously for a postal worker in Pennsylvania, basically that he didn't have to work on Sundays. So what happened is, since 2013, the Postal Service contracted with Amazon to deliver packages, and workers were required to take Sunday shifts for weekend deliveries. So basically, initially, he was transferred to a different post where they didn't deliver on Sundays. But then when that postal office started to deliver on Sundays, he was forced to be put on schedule on Sundays. And he was told, if you can get people to cover your shift, no problem. Well, guess what? He wasn't always able to get people to cover his shift, and basically I think there were like 20 some different shifts that he ended up skipping. Obviously, that caused all sorts of tension in the office, and he realized probably in 2019 that probably he's going to get fired. So he basically resigned, and he did obtain First Liberty Institute. He got their services, and in the lower courts he didn't win, but it did go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And wonderful, he was able to win, and now other people will be able to use this in their whatever it is that they're going to be fighting for. And he basically says that this is a landmark victory not only for Gerald, but for every American, because you shouldn't be forced to choose between your faith and your job. And this man that got the win, he said, I'm delighted that the U.S. Supreme Court reaffirmed our nation's commitment to providing equal opportunity and fair treatment in the workplace. And I love this. He says, more than that, the justices affirmed my decision to trust God by honoring the Lord's Day. I'm grateful to all those who have expressed their support, family, neighbors, so forth. But basically, what I want to say is this. I am so encouraged that somebody would stand up for their faith, even if it meant that they were going to lose their job. Obviously, he knew things were getting tense and he had to leave his work position, but he stood up for the fact that he believed he shouldn't work on a Sunday because it was the Sabbath, and to see that the Supreme Court ruled in his favor is very encouraging. It also brings me to think how many people in our nation right now just working on a Sunday doesn't matter to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a challenge. I think the challenge is that we have, as a culture, this is now going on probably 30, 40 years already, even more. Sundays was revered as a Sabbath or a holy day. I remember people talking about the town shutting down type thing. So it's all, again, propaganda. Money is driving all of this. So then you get the money. The money says, all right, it's another day you can make money. It's just like with Thanksgiving. Remember, Thanksgiving used to be a holiday where nobody was opening, nothing. Now all of a sudden you got celebrating Thanksgiving a week before, and then you got the whole Black Friday and all that. So I think it's a stretching thing for a believer, because ultimately you have challenges with your children. You want to provide opportunities for your children, and then you have these challenges like our kids, where you have sports, because again, it's another way of making money. It's a day where parents are off, so I'll take advantage of it. And so then you're now in a dilemma. What do? Do I withhold my child's opportunity to develop in a sport? So then that means I miss church, and every parent has to battle with that. And so I think that's a challenge, because it's not, it could be a season, of a child's life. And so that's part of your season. But then when you get to the situation with work, again, I think it comes, you don't want to be hypercritical, but the value of the Lord, the value of the Lord's day, the value of the church, and then your ability to trust him, and then your ability to provide resource income, that all comes in play.
I think this shows us how far we've come. Decades ago, Sundays it was all around the church. The church was the central part of what you did on a Sunday, the same way as the church was the central part of the civic system. Everything was circled around the church. Now the church has been pushed to the side, and everything else happens on Sunday, because before, we know that sports were not on Sunday because they knew everybody was going to church on Sunday morning. Also, Wednesday nights were not like sports nights because people were going to church on a Wednesday night. Look how far we've come. But I am pointing these rulings out to you because sometimes it takes one person. Sometimes it takes, did it cost this man something? Of course it did. But you know what happens? It's like if someone stands up, we're able to. What would happen if 50 people stood up? What would happen if 1,000 people stood up? What would happen in those cities where there's mega churches and all of them joined together and said, you know what? All of these sports things, because how many of them are in sports? All these sports we're not going to do, and we're going to boycott them and tell them that, hey, Sunday morning, it's not going to happen because we are all in church. How many other, even in small towns, okay, what if all the churches got together, talked it over, and said, hey, let's work around this so that we get back to allowing God's day to be God's day? I just want to tell you, nothing is gone and nothing is too far gone unless we choose to lie down and do nothing. It is anything is possible. We need to be led by the Lord, and we need to also, I believe a lot of it is being able to somehow join together and form just groups of people coming together in a common goal, in a common vision. So
I just think the pressure is not there. Like, we're having a hard time as it is getting together with no pressure, and because it's the business mentality has come into the church. So we have a problem where, pastors and ministers and churches are fighting for people because it represents, another person, another nickel, another money. So it takes a higher value to be driven to be able to say we want to make effectual change.
Well, and that's the thing. That's why I'm suggesting that this man who said, I'm not going to work on Sunday, it was a higher value for him, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and he got his win.
Well, I think listen, we can applaud and celebrate the fact that he did this, because his cost is we get to benefit from it, because now it's ruled at a Supreme Court level. So now in the future, if there's things that are going to come our way because there's more intensity and pressure, we have now this case to be able to go back to. So, but I just think human nature in general, I don't see it changing radically because there's still too much comfort, and there's too much at stake. So from a standpoint of whether it's your child or whether it's you feel like, well, I can't trust God for a paycheck, these things are,
which goes back to values also,
right. So,
and that, right? I mean, that's
what we're talking about. And so your values get tested when there's more pressure. So when you have a choice, most times, we saw with COVID, you get how many people actually were going to go pass through the fear of getting COVID to get to church, So
I think the challenge is that we have so many mediocre Christians that what's the stat? People that call themselves Christians go to church 1.9 times per month. So I guess the same ones that don't value church on Sunday won't be standing up for something.
And they're going to also
that.
say, well, my other option is I can watch online.
As I'm wherever.
Whatever. Or I'll watch church later. You see what I'm saying? So it takes someone with a deep enough root system of faith and conviction to be able to say, okay. And I'm sure he counted the cost. So I'm sure financially he counted the cost. So it's not like you're talking about someone who's just making an emotional decision. No, he was thinking through because he didn't know how this was going to end up. And so just like many of you who took the religious exemption for your jobs, we commend you because you made a stand, right? You've decided to say my convictions of, I don't feel that this is the right thing to do. I don't trust the shot or whatever. And you put it out on the line. And so that's what we're talking about here. So.
Well, and look how many other people, I mean, just going to, because we are talking about religious freedom. And so when the shots were being mandated, how many people, even with the religious exemptions, people were being turned away from that. Look at our army and people military, people dropping dead, our athletes, young athletes dropping dead because of the shots, and so many people getting sick, and it's out there, and it's definitely not going away because the deaths are just skyrocketing. And yet, maybe the conversation regarding mRNA and the shots have kind of been pushed to the side, but I guarantee you that it's not going away. It's going to be ramped up. And this is an opportunity for you to get more information. If you feel like you don't have enough information about it, let me tell you, now is the time for you to understand what it's all about. Because when the time comes to stand up for religious freedom regarding shots or whatever it is that they want you to put into your body, it's important to know why you would be saying no. It's important to know why it's important, no matter what, to stand, because at that point, if you're not set that this is right and this is wrong, you won't stand. That's kind of what you're talking about also with the values, right?
Right. So, yeah. All right.
Okay, moving right along. So our next Supreme Court positive decision, basically the Supreme Court rejects affirmative action in ruling on universities using race in admissions decisions. So basically in a 6-3 affirmative action opinion, Supreme Court decides using race as factor in college admissions violates Constitution's 14th Amendment. So basically, why did this even happen? Two universities were challenged, were sued, Harvard University and the University of North Carolina, and basically both of them really have been discriminating against the Asian population. I mean, they needed to, think of like something off the charts, really, really high, like a 1540 on your SATs, where 1600 is perfect. They're not getting in, whereas someone typically Hispanic or African American would be getting in with much lower scores just because of the race issue. And so it was really encouraging because Chief Justice John Roberts, he wrote the majority opinion, which was good but not great. Basically, he said a benefit to a student who overcame racial discrimination, for example, must be tied to that student's courage and determination. And basically, he needs that student's unique ability. There must be the ability to contribute to the university. And this is where I kind of question it. He goes, in other words, the student must be treated based on his or her experiences as an individual. And that's where the open door comes in of the university still being able to do things based on his or her experiences versus just,
Well, I think education. I think education encompasses more than just the academic part of it. There's definitely learning of experiences that I think are needed. Like, you may not be as book smart, but your ethic to want to learn and achieve come out in other ways. So
that could be true, but if you are not book smart and you're not able to do well that way, and then you go to a Harvard University, you will not do well.
I think the different institutions have different metrics. They should have different metrics on who they allow in, right? But I think my point is,
we're just talking about those top universities.
No, I would agree with you. It just can't be experiences, right? I mean, and it, quite honestly, it can't just be book smart either. I mean, you got to have the whole package. Quite honestly, you got to be able to show yourself that you are well rounded. So.
Right. So, but not on the basis of race, the opinion reads. And many universities have for too long done just the opposite. And in doing so, they have concluded wrongly that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. And that's like totally opposite of everything that this country has stood for the last X amount of decades. Our constitutional history does not tolerate that choice. That's the reason why we went through all that we did in the 60s, right? And the civil rights and all these different things. And I also loved what Justice Clarence Thomas said. He agreed with this majority opinion, but he also wrote his separate own thoughts. And he says the decision sees the university's admissions policies for what they are: rudderless, race-based preferences designed to ensure a particular racial mix in their entering classes. So basically he's saying the way things have been, the policies that we've had, they are basically looking for a certain mixture of color. Those policies fly in the face of our colorblind Constitution and our nation's equality ideal. In short, they are plainly and boldly unconstitutional. And this is what he says, being a black man: while I am painfully aware of the social and economic ravages which have befallen my race and all who suffer discrimination, I hold out enduring hope that this country will live up to its principles so clearly enunciated in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. This is what it comes down to, that all men are created equal, are equal citizens, and must be treated equally before the law. We can really put that towards so many different things that are happening in our nation. That's really what it comes down to. That's really, where did they get that idea from? They got it from the Bible, that all men are created equal. We are equal before the cross. We are made equally. We're all sinful. We are all equal because we are made in the image of God. So no one is greater than or less than, but it all comes down to what we put into in order to be able to be allowed into an institution. If we have shown that we have put the work in, that we have done different things, we should be allowed in there. And this was actually quite a back and forth was going on with one of the lawyers for the other side. And basically, Waxman, who is the lawyer, admitted that race was decisive for some highly qualified applicants. He says, just like being an oboe player in a year in which the Harvard Radcliffe Orchestra needs an oboe player. Listen to the response by Roberts. We did not fight a civil war about oboe players. Roberts shot back. We did fight a civil war to eliminate racial discrimination. How powerful is that, right?
And he's the guy who we questioned whether he was really on the side of
Maybe
truth.
he just opened up a little something that,
Sure.
could be exploited by the universities, basically. That's what I was saying. But that's the bottom line. It's we fought a civil war. I say we, I wasn't in this country. I wasn't even born.
Powerful
But
statement.
this nation fought a civil war not for other reasons, but to fight and eliminate racial discrimination. And now on so many levels, we have racial discrimination going across the board. And how many of our churches have gotten into that racial discrimination, thinking that it's all about loving my neighbor, but it's really looking at someone based on the color of their skin, whereas God says, no, we are all equal. We are all
Yeah,
made in the image
we're
of
actually
God.
lowering the equality that God set forth through his son Jesus. And that's what we don't understand when we're talking about affirmative action and then trying to somehow create an organization, so to speak, and making sure that we have enough representation of it. The gospel message started, let me just read a verse here, Acts 10:34, when the gospel was going to be led, because it was discriminated at first to the Jew in the Old Testament for a purpose. It wasn't to discriminate the other nations. God already had a thought in mind of the nations before he even created the Jewish nation, so we knew that through Abram. But the point is, when he began to then open it up after Christ did the work in Acts 10, when Peter went to Cornelius' house, this is what he says, then Peter opened his mouth and said, in truth, I perceive that God shows no partiality. He recognized he was trained and grown in a specific paradigm of thought. The Lord had to blow that up or refine it or upgrade it to the reality that the gospel of Jesus Christ is not just for the Jew, but it's also for the nations and the Gentiles of the world. And so that requires tremendous courage to be able to listen, we're not here trying to, on either side of the pendulum. We're not here to discriminate on one end, and we're not going to discriminate on another end. But ultimately, we're here creating, like you said, all men are created equal. And based on merit, based on how you perform, you are allowed to do certain things. It's just like this whole thing with raising children, and everybody's a winner, right? There's somebody nobody loses, because we're trying to soften the blow of loss. But that's how the world is made. That's how life is. There's winners and losers. One is not better than the other. It's just, this is the facts of life.
Well, someone is going to be better at playing baseball. Somebody else is going to be better at taking their math test. Somebody else is going to be better at cooking. Somebody else is going to be... We all have different skill sets that we're given, but we're all, as far as our value,
Correct.
We all have equal value because we are all image bearers of Christ, right? And yet all of us are fallen and all of us need a savior. And so that's really the bottom line. And I'll just finish up this whole idea of this affirmative action decision. Basically, in 2003, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor was the swinging or deciding vote in the Supreme Court race of affirmative action and all the policies that went along with it. Basically for universities. But the court majority led by O'Connor offered this caveat. And she said, we expect that 25 years from now, the use of racial preferences will no longer be necessary to further the interest approved today. So now we're 19 years ahead, and a 6-3 conservative court majority has now blocked colleges and universities from using race as part of the competitive admissions process. So I think it's very interesting where we're at. I think this was a great we moved
Start.
in the right direction. We're going to have to wait and see how universities are going to be using this and changing their policies based on this. But I have to tell you, definitely the Asian population has really been affected because of this. I mean, they work, it is what it is. They excel in larger number there.
Well,
So,
and I wonder the agenda behind all this. Again, we kind of think and know that the universities are trying to mind mold a generation with a specific rhetoric. So I'm wondering if that's part of the agenda as well, to get a certain amount because they feel like they can, I don't know, I'm just throwing out here, they can feel like they're more impressionable and they're not going to fight back, or they're not going to stand back to the deconstructionism that's being in American universities, or the rewriting of American history, or all these different things. I'm not.
well, I mean, I think we just see even in universities, obviously there are certain ones that, are very challenging, but you see so many majors that really are just fluff, right? Like that are nothing. And like, how are you going to use it other than the government paying you to do women's studies, or to do gender studies, or to, I mean, there's so many just silly ones that are very fluff. But I would just say that this, it's encouraging. It's encouraging that our Supreme Court, again, thank you, President Trump, for our Supreme Court. But how encouraging is it that we are moving in the right direction? Slowly as it may be, but these are huge. These are huge decisions that, very easily could have gone in a different direction, but they didn't. And so I would say now is not the time to be faint of heart and to be overwhelmed by all the negative. It's time to fight. Just like somebody had to, and it was the Asian population that brought this up through the Supreme Court, because again, on the lower levels, they lost, the universities won. But as they rose to higher levels, to the Supreme Court, that's where they won. Right. And yet, so but it takes effort. Like none of these things happened just happened, right? People had to fight to
pay money. The fight is in every area. So it's not just like I have a will. There's a cost to all these things. So that's why it's commendable, because they have paid a price, not just for themselves, but for us. And again, I think there's still from what I understand, there's some loopholes that the colleges can get around. They can get around this to do what they still want.
But we're moving in the right direction.
Correct. So it's, but I think overall, thank God that if our Constitution and our constitutional republic is still at hand, the saving grace for our nation is ultimately that Supreme Court judicial branch, because at the end of the day, they have power, as you can see, to interpret laws. That's what they're doing. They're not creating laws, they're interpreting laws. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as long as those laws are written in the documents of our bylaws and Constitution and so forth, technically, we could still have these freedoms, right? Technically. Now, that can get usurped by a civil war, it can get usurped by emergency powers and all that stuff, but technically, these are the safeguards of how we founded this nation, with this three-branch prong of government that provides safeguards from not allowing one to dominate over the other. So,
I would encourage you guys, if there are certain topics you would want us to discuss, or if you have questions on certain things, why don't you type that into our chat, and we would love to dive into things that you're interested about. So
awesome. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much today. I encourage you to share the broadcast. Great conversation about things, about really just trying to bring a biblical perspective to cultural things that are affecting our everyday. And the reality is, just because some church leadership don't want to deal with it, doesn't mean that the people that are sitting in those churches don't. Many are doing, and they're looking, and that's why there's avenues of power. Unfortunately, parachurch ministries and ministers that are not pastoring are receiving a lot of response because they're talking about these issues that are affecting our everyday. They're not just putting blinders on and say, I don't want to see, I don't want to hear, I just want to continue to be spiritual and preach the gospel. Yes, we need to do that, but to ignore our everyday life is really, that's our assignment. Our assignment is, we're going to go to heaven, thank God. Our assignment is, how do we live here on this place to be salt and light and to occupy? So that's why having conversations about these issues are important. Though they may not be extremely spiritual, it's giving us a mind to interpret through the lens of the Bible of how God will want us to respond. So thank you, Pastor Anna, for all your work. We appreciate your labor of research, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with her again. But until next time, Lord willing, we'll see you guys tonight for prayer. If not, Sunday morning. Got a special guest with us. Looking forward to that. Evangelist Jermel Mayo will be with us. He's a powerful speaker. And so, Lord willing, we'll talk to you guys soon. Share the broadcast. Stay in touch. If you have topics you want us, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. God bless you and enjoy the summer. In Jesus' name.
Bye-bye.